The train had already been moving for several minutes when Lena noticed the warmth beside her. Not the warmth of the seat, which was always faintly sun-warmed by the time it left the station, but the warmth of another body, close enough to register without touching. She shifted her bag from her lap to the floor, more out of habit than need, and felt the slight sway of the car as it rounded the curve past the inlet. The windows were open a few inches. Salt and metal and something faintly sweet threaded the air. She did not look right away. She rarely did. Saturday mornings were practiced quiet. The same carriage. The same seat near the window, second row from the door. The same book, never the same book, but always folded at the spine, pages softened by use. The same 38 minutes of watching the coastline appear and retreat, appear again, until the sea opened fully and the town came into view. She knew the rhythm of it well enough that her body relaxed before her mind did. Then a voice, unguarded and low. "Do you mind if I sit here?" Lena turned, already nodding, already shifting her knees inward to make space. She caught the smell first. Sunscreen. The mineral kind, clean and warm, like skin that would be outside today. The woman slid into the seat with an ease that suggested she was unafraid of occupying space. Her bag brushed Lena's ankle. Not an apology. Just contact. "Thanks," the woman said, smiling as if they'd already spoken before. She had dark hair pulled into a loose knot at the nape of her neck, strands escaping in the way hair did when it refused to be managed. She wore a linen shirt, pale blue, sleeves rolled without symmetry. A book rested against her thigh, folded at the corner. A dog-eared confession of affection. Lena felt the small internal click she always did when something moved her out of pattern. "It's usually empty," Lena said, immediately wishing she hadn't narrated the obvious. "I know," the woman replied, still smiling. "I almost didn't sit, but I thought, why not? Why not?" The phrase stayed with Lena longer than it should have. They rode for several minutes without speaking. The train hummed, a steady mechanical breath beneath the chatter of rails. Outside, the water flashed silver through breaks in the trees. The woman beside her shifted, crossing one ankle over the other, knee angling closer than before. Their sleeves brushed. Linen against cotton. Dry warmth. "I'm Aria," she said suddenly, as if responding to something Lena hadn't voiced. "Lena, nice to meet you, Lena." It sounded like she meant it. They fell into conversation the way some people did when neither was trying. Small things at first. Where they were headed. The weather. The way the light looked different this early, sharper, less forgiving. Aria laughed with her mouth open, then pressed her lips together as if catching herself too late. Lena noticed the faint indentation in her lower lip, the kind that came from teeth resting there often. Aria pointed at the book in Lena's hands. "Is it good?" Lena glanced down, surprised to find she'd been holding it without reading. "I think so. I keep rereading the same page. Then it's either very good or very distracting, or I am." Aria smiled again, softer this time. "Maybe both." The train lurched slightly as it slowed near a crossing. Their shoulders tipped, instinctively correcting. Aria's hand brushed Lena's wrist, tan accident, brief, almost nothing. But Lena felt it like a pause in sound, the sudden absence of the hum she'd grown accustomed to. She did not pull away. Neither did Aria. They both laughed a little too quickly, the way people did when acknowledging something without naming it. "I should hold on," Aria said, reaching for the metal bar above the seat. Her arm lifted, sleeve falling back to reveal skin browned by sun, freckles scattered without pattern. Lena followed the motion before she could stop herself. Not desire exactly. Attention. The body noticing what the mind had not yet categorized. The train resumed speed. The moment passed. Or folded itself somewhere quieter. They talked until the coastline widened, until the smell of salt grew stronger, until the station announcement crackled overhead. When the train slowed again, Aria gathered her bag, hesitating. "This is me," she said. "I don't usually get off here." Lena closed her book. "Me neither. I mean, usually I do, today." Aria laughed. "Right." They stood together, swaying with the car, waiting for the doors to open. The space between them felt altered, charged not with urgency but with awareness. When the doors slid apart, sunlight flooded in, bright and immediate. "Maybe I'll see you around," Aria said, stepping onto the platform. "Maybe," Lena replied, and surprised herself by meaning it. She watched Arya walk away, unhurried, shoulders loose, head tilted slightly as if listening to something internal. Only when the doors closed again did Lena realize her chest felt different. Not tight, just open, in a way that made her uncomfortable. The rest of the day unfolded as it always did. The bookstore smelled of paper and wood polish, and old salt carried in on tourist clothes. Lena arranged displays, rang up purchases, answered questions she'd answered before. She made coffee at noon, the bitter warmth grounding her. She wiped the counter twice, though it was already clean. Still, her thoughts returned, not to Arya's face exactly, but to the moment before the touch, when the possibility of it had existed. The way time had seemed to hover, undecided. On her break, she walked down to the beach, shoes in hand, the sand warm beneath her feet. The tide was low, the water pulling back as if making room for something. Families clustered near the shore. A couple argued quietly near the dunes. A dog ran, stopped, ran again. Lena sat on a flat rock and let the sun settle on her skin. She closed her eyes, breathing in salt and sunscreen, and the faint sweetness of something familiar she couldn't place. "You look like someone who knows how to sit still." Lena opened her eyes. Arya stood a few feet away, barefoot, her shoes dangling from 2 fingers. Her hair was loose now, darker at the ends where it had dried unevenly. She smiled, tentative this time, as if unsure of her welcome. "I'm practicing," Lena said. "Mind if I join you?" She didn't. Arya sat, close enough that their knees nearly touched. Close enough that Lena could feel the warmth again, this time intensified by the sun. They watched the water in silence, the sound of waves filling the space words might have occupied. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Lena lost count. She was aware of her breath, of the way Arya's foot traced idle patterns in the sand, of the gulls overhead. Nothing pressed, nothing demanded. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," Arya said eventually. "I'm here most days after work." "Then I'm glad I guessed right." Lena considered that. The idea of being guessed. They spoke then of nothing important. Favorite places. Coffee preferences. The way the town felt different depending on where you stood. Arya listened with her whole body angled toward Lena, attention unbroken. When Lena spoke, she felt held. Not by hands. By presence. At one point, Arya reached for her sunscreen, squeezing a line onto her palm. "I always forget," she said, rubbing it into her forearm. The smell bloomed between them, immediate and intimate. She hesitated, then held the bottle out. "Do you want some?" Lena nodded. Arya's fingers were cool as she applied it, careful, deliberate. She did not rush. Lena watched the motion, the way Arya's thumb traced small circles, absorbed, unthinking. The touch was practical. And yet, Lena swallowed. A child ran past, laughing, chased by a woman calling his name. A breeze lifted, carrying voices, music from somewhere distant. The world continued, unbothered by the quiet forming between them. When Arya pulled her hand back, Lena felt the absence like a soft echo. "I should go," Arya said after a while. Not regretful. Just factual. "I told myself I'd only stay a little." "Okay." They stood together, brushing sand from their legs. Arya hesitated again, then leaned in and pressed a quick kiss to Lena's cheek. It was light, barely there. But Lena felt it long after. "See you," Arya said. "See you." Lena watched her go, the way she had on the platform. Only this time the watching felt heavier, threaded with something she couldn't yet name. As the sun dipped lower, Lena remained on the rock, replaying moments not because she wanted to remember them, but because they refused to settle. The warmth beside her on the train. The pause before the touch. The way Arya had said her name. "Why not?" the phrase whispered again. It did not feel like a question. It felt like an opening. The next Saturday did not arrive quietly. It announced itself in Lena's body before her mind caught up. An earlier waking, a restless awareness that made the ceiling feel closer than usual. She lay still, listening to the apartment breathe around her. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of a car passing, the faint creak of pipes adjusting to morning. Nothing had changed. And yet, She dressed slower than usual, choosing and re-choosing clothes without a clear reason. She tied her hair back, then loosened it again. When she left the apartment, the air already held that particular brightness that promised heat later. Summer edging in, not yet heavy, but confident. On the train she took her usual seat. The space beside her remained empty as the doors closed. Lena told herself, gently, firmly, that this meant nothing. Routine reclaimed itself easily when allowed. She opened her book, found the page she had left folded, and began to read. 2 paragraphs in, someone sat down. She didn't look at first. She didn't need to. "Hi," Arya said softly, as if entering a room already occupied by thought. Lena closed the book with more care than necessary. "Hi." Arya smelled the same. Sunscreen and something clean beneath it, maybe soap, maybe just her. She wore a sleeveless dress this time, light fabric that moved with the train, patterned with something Lena couldn't immediately identify. Arya's hair was braided loosely over one shoulder, the end brushing her collarbone when she shifted. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here," Arya said. "I almost wasn't. Almost," Arya repeated, smiling. "I like that word." They rode for a while without speaking, the quiet already familiar, no longer something to bridge. Lena noticed how their legs angled toward each other without decision, how Arya's knee hovered close enough to register heat but not touch. "I brought a different book," Arya said eventually, tapping the one in her lap. "But I don't think I'll read it." Lena glanced at the cover. "Why not?" Arya shrugged. "Distractions." Lena felt that small internal click again, sharper this time. They talked, about nothing urgent, everything gentle. Arya told her she was from inland, that the sea still felt like a borrowed thing. Lena talked about the bookstore, about the way tourists asked for recommendations without knowing what they wanted. Arya listened like it mattered. When the train slowed near the crossing, the familiar sway returned. This time Arya's hand found Lena's forearm, not accidental, not quite intentional either. She didn't apologize. She simply left it there, fingers resting lightly, as if testing a temperature. Lena did not move. When the train picked up speed again, the hand slipped away. The absence lingered longer than the touch had. They got off at the same stop. Walked together without discussing it. The morning light washed the street in pale gold. Shops were opening slowly, metal grates lifting with a clatter that echoed and faded. "I don't have plans," Arya said, as if offering something without asking. "I work until 3, Lena replied. Arya considered that. "I could wait. You don't have to. I know." They settled into the cafe near the corner, the one with chipped mugs and windows that never quite closed. Lena ordered coffee she didn't need. Arya ordered the same without looking at the menu. They sat across from each other, knees almost touching beneath the small table. Arya stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, the spoon clicking softly against ceramic. Lena watched the motion, the repetition soothing. "Do you come here often?" Arya asked. "Enough to know which table wobbles. This one does," Arya said, nudging it with her knee. Lena smiled. "I forgot." They fell into an easy rhythm, sips of coffee, shared glances, the comfortable overlap of sentences. Time stretched without losing shape. At one point, Arya reached across the table to brush a crumb from Lena's sleeve. The gesture was quick, practical. And yet Lena felt the imprint of it long after Arya's hand returned to her own cup. When Lena left for work, Arya walked her part of the way, stopping just before the bookstore. "I'll see you later?" Arya asked, the question careful, unassuming. "Yes." The word felt like a promise even though it wasn't. The afternoon passed in fragments. Lena shelved books, answered questions, smiled when required. Her thoughts kept circling back, not to what might happen, but to what already had. The hand on her arm. The way Arya said her name, like it was something she wanted to remember. When her shift ended, Arya was waiting outside, leaning against the window reading. "You look like you belong there," Lena said. Arya looked up, surprised. "Inside or outside? Both." They walked to the beach again, the day warmer now, the air thicker with sun. They sat on the same rock as before, though neither commented on the choice. Familiarity without discussion. They shared a bag of fries from a nearby stand, fingers brushing occasionally as they reached in. Each time, the contact felt deliberate without being declared. Arya licked salt from her thumb, caught Lena watching, smiled without embarrassment. They talked about childhood, about places they'd loved and left. Arya spoke of the way she moved often, how she never stayed long enough for things to settle. Lena listened, felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. "Does that bother you?" Lena asked. "Sometimes," Arya said. "Sometimes it feels like freedom." Lena nodded, unsure which part she believed. A group of teenagers passed, laughing too loudly. A couple walked hand in hand near the water. The world moved around them, indifferent and continuous. At some point, Arya leaned back on her hands, stretching her legs out, her foot brushing Lena's calf. She didn't pull away. Neither did Lena. The contact settled into something steady, unremarkable in its constancy. "I like sitting with you," Arya said, almost to herself. Lena felt the words land and stay. They stayed until the sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening. When Arya stood, she offered a hand to Lena. The gesture was simple. Lena took it. Their fingers fit easily. Too easily. They didn't let go right away. At the station, the train doors open. Arya paused. "I'll be around tomorrow too," she said. "Just tomorrow?" Lena nodded. "Okay." The word held weight now. As the train pulled away, Lena watched Arya through the window until she disappeared from view. Her hand still tingled where Arya's had been. That night, lying in bed, Lena found herself replaying the same moments, not searching for meaning, just returning to them. The way Arya waited. The way she touched without asking and never took more than was offered. The thought returned, quieter now but persistent. Why not? It didn't demand an answer. It simply stayed. Morning arrived already charged. Lena noticed it in the way her thoughts refused to settle into their usual shape, how every small sound, the kettle clicking off, the gulls crying somewhere distant, seemed sharpened, outlined. She moved through her apartment with a careful slowness, as if any sudden gesture might disrupt something fragile she was carrying inside her chest. She dressed simply. There was no point pretending choice would change what today already was. On the walk to the station, the sun sat higher than it had the day before, light spilling across the pavement with quiet confidence. Lena felt exposed beneath it, as if something about her had shifted outward, become legible. The train doors opened. She stepped inside. Arya was already there. Not seated yet, standing near the door, one hand looped loosely around a pole, her body swaying with the train's first movement. When she saw Lena, her face changed in a way that felt immediate and unguarded. Recognition, yes, but also relief. "You're early," Arya said, falling into step beside her as they walked down the aisle. "So are you. I didn't trust myself to sit still at home." Lena felt that land somewhere low in her body. They took their usual seat. The space between them felt different now, not wider, not smaller, just a weight. Lena noticed the way Arya angled herself toward her without thinking, how their knees brushed almost immediately. Neither commented. The train moved. The coastline slid into view. Familiar scenery, altered only by attention. They spoke less than they had the day before. Or perhaps they spoke the same amount, but every word carried more weight. When Arya laughed, Lena felt it in her shoulders. When Lena looked out the window too long, Arya waited without filling the space. At one point, Arya reached for Lena's book, lifting it gently from her hands. "You're not reading this," she said. "I know." Arya smiled, placed it carefully back on Lena's lap. Her fingers lingered just a moment longer than necessary, long enough to ask something without words. Lena didn't move. When the train slowed, the familiar sway returned, but this time neither of them reached for balance. Their shoulders pressed together, steadying each other. Arya's breath brushed Lena's cheek. Warm, unhurried. Lena's body responded before she understood how, her breath deepening, her spine straightening slightly as if preparing for something unnamed. They got off together again, walked in step without adjusting pace. Outside, the air was already warming, the smell of salt more pronounced. "What do you want to do today?" Arya asked. Lena considered the question, not because she lacked answers, but because answering felt like choosing something she wasn't sure she was allowed to choose. Nothing special, she said finally. Arya nodded. Good. They went for coffee, the same cafe as before. Sat at the same table, the wobble now expected. Arya reached out immediately, pressing her fingers against the table's edge to steady it. You remembered, Lena said. Arya smiled. I remember things like that. The statement stayed with Lena longer than it should have. They lingered over their drinks. Shared a pastry, tearing it in half without ceremony. Sugar dusted Arya's thumb. She wiped it on a napkin, then hesitated, laughing quietly at herself. Lena watched the small choreography of it, the way Arya's attention drifted and returned. Time stretched. The cafe filled and emptied around them. A woman at the counter argued gently with the barista about oatmeal. Someone dropped a spoon. The door chimed open and closed. At one point, Arya leaned forward, elbows on the table. I leave tomorrow night, she said, not looking away. Lena's chest tightened, not sharply, but with a slow, spreading awareness. Okay, she replied, because anything else felt like too much. Arya studied her face as if gauging what that okay contained. Then she nodded, accepting it for what it was. They walked to the beach again. The tide was higher now, water creeping closer to the rocks. They sat side by side, shoulders touching. Arya pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them, her posture relaxed but attentive. They spoke less. Silence settled between them, not empty but dense. Lena became acutely aware of the space her body occupied, of the warmth radiating from Arya's side, of the way their breaths sometimes fell into sync. Desire hovered, not as urgency, but as presence. A quiet, insistent awareness that something was unfolding whether they named it or not. Arya shifted, turning slightly toward Lena. Their faces were closer now. Close enough that Lena could see the faint lines at the corners of Arya's eyes, the way her pupils adjusted to the light. This feels... Arya began, then stopped. Lena waited. Unexpected, Arya finished. Yes, Lena said. Then after a pause. But not unwelcome. Arya exhaled, a small sound that felt like release. She didn't move closer right away. Instead, she lifted her hand slowly, deliberately, and rested it on the rock between them. Palm open. An offering, not a demand. Lena looked at it. At the space it created. She placed her own hand beside Arya's. Their fingers touched, tentative at first, then settling together naturally, as if they'd always known how. Neither spoke. The world continued around them. Waves breaking. Voices drifting. Somewhere, a radio played faintly. Arya turned her head slightly. Lena felt the shift before she saw it. Their foreheads nearly touched. Breath mingled. The moment stretched, suspended. Arya paused, searching Lena's face. Lena nodded. The kiss was gentle, unrushed. More a meeting than an action. Arya's lips were warm, soft, lingering just long enough to be felt and remembered. When they parted, neither moved far. Foreheads rested together, breaths uneven. Lena felt everything at once. The warmth, the closeness, the quiet shock of having crossed something she couldn't uncross. Arya smiled, small and unguarded. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Lena echoed. They stayed like that for a while, touching only where they already were. No urgency followed. Just presence. Just the steady awareness of having shifted the shape of something. Eventually they stood. Walked back toward town. Their hands brushed occasionally, deliberately careless. The afternoon passed in fragments. A shared sandwich. A walk along the pier. A moment in the bookstore where Arya trailed her fingers along spines, reading titles aloud in a low voice meant only for Lena. The world noticed nothing. But Lena felt altered. As if a door had opened somewhere inside her and refused to close again. That night, lying in bed, the memory of the kiss returned, not demanding, not restless, just there. A warmth that settled into her bones. Some things, she realized, did not need time to become irreversible. The morning after the kiss arrived without gentleness. Lena noticed it in the quiet first. The way the apartment felt emptied of something it had briefly learned to hold. The light through the curtains was thinner today, angled differently, less generous. She lay still longer than usual, the memory of Aria's mouth lingering not as heat but as pressure, like a thought pressed to the back of her teeth. Nothing had been taken. Nothing promised. And still, something had shifted beyond her ability to return it. She showered, dressed, made coffee she barely touched. Her phone remained face down on the table. She did not check it. She did not want to notice the absence before it announced itself. When she stepped outside, the air carried the familiar salt and sun, but it no longer felt purely inviting. It felt instructive. Time was moving, whether she participated or not. At the station, the train doors opened with their usual mechanical sigh. Lena stepped inside, scanning the carriage without intending to. Aria was there, already seated this time, one row back, by the window. She looked up when Lena entered, her expression softening, then settling into something more guarded. Not distant, just careful. Lena took the seat beside her. They sat without speaking. The space between them felt altered again, but in the opposite direction, no longer charged with anticipation, now thick with awareness. Lena could feel Aria's presence without touching her, like heat lingering after a flame had been extinguished. "I didn't know if you'd come," Aria said quietly. "I didn't know if I wouldn't." Aria smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." Lena wasn't sure if that was true, or if it had become true recently. The train began to move. Outside, the coastline slid past unchanged. Lena focused on the rhythm of it, on the way the trees blurred into something almost soft. They talked, but cautiously now, about neutral things. The weather. A movie Aria had watched the night before. The way the train was more crowded than usual. Each sentence felt like a test, how much weight it could carry without breaking. At one point, Aria reached for the metal bar above the seat as the train lurched. Her arm brushed Lena's shoulder. This time she pulled away immediately. Lena felt the restraint more sharply than the contact would have registered. They got off together, walked side by side without touching. Outside, the day had already warmed, sunlight pressing down with insistent brightness. "Do you want coffee?" Aria asked. "Yes," Lena said, then hesitated. "If you do, I do." The cafe was busier than the day before. Fewer empty tables. More noise. They waited in line, standing close without acknowledging it. When it was their turn, Aria ordered first, then stepped aside, making space for Lena as if the choreography still mattered. They found a small table near the back, sat across from each other. The wobble was still there, but neither reached to steady it this time. Their conversation faltered, then resumed, then faltered again. Silence settled between them more often, heavier now. Lena became acutely aware of her own body, of the way she held herself slightly apart, as if protecting something fragile inside her rib cage. "I leave tonight," Aria said eventually. The words landed quietly. No drama. No demand. "I know," Lena replied. Aria watched her closely. "Do you?" Lena nodded. "You told me." Aria's gaze softened, then tightened, as if she were seeing something she hadn't expected to see. They drank their coffee. Shared a pastry without touching this time, each tearing off their own piece. The absence of contact felt deliberate, not punitive, protective. Afterward, they walked toward the beach. The tide was high now, waves reaching farther up the shore, erasing footprints almost as soon as they were made. They sat on the same rock, though the familiarity now felt fragile, like a habit that might break if examined too closely. They spoke less. When they did, their words felt careful, measured. Lena noticed how Aria's posture had changed, no longer leaning in, now holding herself upright, composed. "I don't usually do this," Aria said suddenly. Lena turned toward her. "Do what?" "Stay," Aria said. Even briefly. Lena absorbed that. The words stayed echoed differently now. "I don't usually," Lena began, then stopped. She wasn't sure how to finish the sentence without exposing something she wasn't ready to name. Aria nodded, as if understanding anyway. They sat in silence for a long while. Long enough that Lena lost track of minutes. Long enough for the sun to shift slightly, for shadows to lengthen. Lena's thoughts fragmented. She found herself circling the same questions without resolution. What did it mean to feel this much without asking for more? Was restraint a kindness or a failure of courage? Could something be both fleeting and significant without demanding grief? Arya stood eventually, brushing sand from her dress. "I should go pack," she said. "Okay." They walked back toward town together, past shops closing for the afternoon, past people who did not notice them, who had no reason to. At the bookstore, Arya paused. "I liked being here with you," she said. "So did I." They stood facing each other, close enough that Lena could feel Arya's warmth again. Close enough that it would have been easy to close the distance. Arya didn't move. Neither did Lena. The moment stretched, suspended between impulse and restraint. Lena felt the tension settle into her shoulders, into her jaw. Her body leaned forward slightly, then stopped. Arya lifted her hand, then let it fall back to her side. "I'm glad we didn't rush," Arya said quietly. Lena nodded. The agreement felt true and painful at the same time. They parted without touching. That evening, Lena returned to her apartment, the rooms feeling too large, too quiet. She cooked dinner she barely tasted, sat on the edge of her bed, the weight of the day pressing down slowly. Her phone remained silent. She told herself this was expected, that nothing had been promised, that restraint was its own kind of care. Still, the unfinished choice lingered, stretching, unresolved, asking nothing and everything at once. Lena woke before the alarm, the room still dim, the quiet heavy with unfinished thought. The night had not given her answers. It had only softened the edges of the questions, worn them down until they no longer cut but pressed. She lay on her back, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling she'd never bothered to fix, and felt the absence beside her not as loneliness, but as space. Space she had invited, space she had protected. Arya would leave today. The thought arrived without panic. Just fact. Like weather. Lena moved slowly through the morning, letting routine hold her where certainty could not. She washed her face. She made coffee and drank it this time, standing by the window watching a delivery truck struggle into a tight parking spot. Ordinary persistence. The world continuing. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. She didn't reach for it right away. When she did, Arya's name appeared without punctuation, without explanation. "Train?" Lena's reply came after a pause long enough to feel intentional. "Yes." She didn't add anything else. Neither did Arya. The station was brighter than usual, the sun already asserting itself, the air warm even in the shade. Lena stood on the platform with her bag at her feet, aware of her own stillness, the way she seemed rooted while others shifted and paced. Arya arrived just before the train, walking with the same unhurried stride, her dress lighter today, her hair loose again. She smiled when she saw Lena, not wide, not cautious. Real. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They boarded together, took their usual seat. The familiarity felt earned now, not accidental. They sat close, shoulders touching briefly as the train lurched forward, then settling back into a careful distance that acknowledged everything without pressing. Neither reached for a book. The ride unfolded quietly. Outside, the coastline slid past in its patient repetition. Lena watched it without really seeing it, her attention turned inward, listening. What she noticed most was her own body. The absence of tension she'd expected to find. The steadiness instead. Her breath deepened, unforced. The moment no longer felt like something she had to decide quickly. Arya shifted beside her, crossing her legs, then uncrossing them again. Her knee brushed Lena's thigh and stayed there. Not asking, not insisting. Just there. Lena let it be. At the crossing, the train slowed. This time Arya didn't reach for the bar. She let the sway carry her gently against Lena's shoulder. Lena felt the weight, light but deliberate. She did not move away. They shared a look, not charged, not urgent. Acknowledging. When they stepped off the train, neither spoke right away. They walked together, the town opening up around them, shops just beginning to stir. The cafe was open. The same one. As if the day itself had decided not to change too much. Inside, it was quieter than usual. Early hour. They ordered coffee, then stood waiting, shoulders angled toward each other, the space between them narrow but calm. They sat at the familiar table. The wobble was still there. This time Aria reached out immediately, steadying it with practiced ease. "I leave this afternoon," she said, as if continuing a conversation that had never stopped. "I know. I didn't want to leave without seeing you." Lena nodded. The words didn't feel like pressure. They felt like truth offered gently. They drank their coffee slowly, stared at a pastry again, this time tearing it in half without thinking, their fingers brushing, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. The contact felt easy now, no longer fraught with decision. Silence settled between them, not heavy, not awkward. Full. Full. Lena found herself watching the way Aria held her cup, both hands wrapped around it, thumbs resting along the rim. A repeated gesture. Familiar already. She realized then, not suddenly, not dramatically, that she wasn't afraid of the ending. She was afraid of denying the middle. The clarity didn't rush her. It simply arrived, calm and undeniable. "I don't want to pretend this didn't matter," Lena said quietly. Aria looked up, her expression open. "I don't either. I also don't want to ask you for something you can't give." Aria held her gaze. "I can give you today." Lena smiled faintly. "That's enough." The words surprised her with their truth. Not resignation. Acceptance. They finished their coffee. Paid. Walked back out into the morning. The sun had climbed higher now, warming everything it touched. They headed toward the beach without discussion, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. They sat on the rock one last time, closer now, knees touching fully. Aria leaned into Lena's side, resting her head briefly against her shoulder. Lena lifted her arm without thinking, letting it settle around Aria's back. The contact felt natural. Grounded. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The waves filled the space, steady and indifferent. Time moved, unbothered by their stillness. Eventually, Aria turned her face toward Lena's neck, breathing her in. Lena felt the warmth, the proximity, the quiet intensity of it. When Aria kissed her, it was slower than before. Deeper. Not urgent. Not grasping. A kiss that understood its own limits and chose presence anyway. They stayed there afterward, foreheads touching, breath mingling, the world continuing unabashedly around them. Lena felt the imprint of Aria's body against hers, memorizing it not out of fear of loss, but out of respect. Later, they walked back through town, hands brushing, then finally interlacing without ceremony. They stopped at the bookstore. Aria wandered the aisles while Lena watched from behind the counter, her heart strangely steady. At the door, Aria paused. "I don't regret this," she said. "Neither do I." They hugged, fully this time, arms wrapping, bodies aligned. When they pulled back, Aria pressed one last kiss to Lena's cheek, then another to the corner of her mouth, not quite a kiss, not quite not. "Thank you for not asking me to stay," Aria said softly. "Thank you for staying anyway." Aria smiled, eyes bright. Then she turned and walked away. Lena watched until she disappeared down the street, the feeling inside her not hollow, not aching. Full. The afternoon unfolded. The bookstore filled and emptied. Lena shelved books, answered questions, smiled when required. Life resumed, altered but intact. That evening, she took the train home alone, sat in the same seat, watched the coastline appear and retreat. Space beside her remained empty. It didn't feel like absence. It felt like something held. Some encounters don't ask to be kept forever, only to be lived honestly while they're here. If this resonated, you're not alone. Share your truth in the comments, or simply let it sit with you quietly. For more stories exploring love without borders, subscribe to Secret Garden Stories and share this with someone who needs to see themselves reflected. We grow by connection. Thank you for being part of this garden.